I've been fortunate enough to see Roma play in the States a number of times since American ownership took over. Starting with Fenway in 2012, I've made numerous weekend and day trips in the years that have followed to Philadelphia, Washington, and Boston. Plus, Roma's even played at Red Bull Arena twice. My home stadium is a New York Red Bull season ticket holder. When it was announced that my beloved Giallorossi would be returning to my backyard to play Real Madrid at MetLife Stadium, truth be told, I was pretty hyped. The ICC isn't Serie A or the Champions League. In the end, it's just a bunch of overhyped, overpriced preseason friendlies meant to rake in US dollars for the promoters and clubs. However, I always try and take the opportunity to support Roma in person when possible. Last summer, I was able to bring my, at the time girlfriend, now fiancé, to her first live Roma game at Red Bull to see I Lupi take on Tottenham. She ended up being one of the loudest people in a section filled with Spurs supporters, and she loved every minute of it, except Manolis rolling around on the ground repeatedly, but that's a story for another day. A few weeks later, we took a weekend trip to Boston with her cousin and her cousin's husband, a Juve fan, to see Roma take on the Scudetto holders at Foxborough. Again, she loved every minute of it, from the opening training session, to the tailgate, to the actual match. It was further affirmation that I was marrying the right woman. I knew that last summer's experiences had gotten her to feel more of an affinity for the squad when she exclaimed, "We're screwed," when the 9-goal sale news broke. With the news that Roma was returning to the metro area, it didn't take much convincing for her to join me for the Madrid match. She wasn't quite as enthusiastic about the open training session at Red Bull Arena, but decided to attend in hopes of getting close to one of her favorites, Florenzi or El Shaarawy. Luckily for me, she gravitates toward cute Italian men. Our first of 2 trips to Jersey began with the ride down to Red Bull for the training session. To sum it up in short, waste of time. To begin, all of the fans were seated on one side of the field. We were able to secure 2 front-row midfield seats, and despite them being bathed in the blazing August sun on a humid day, it seemed like a score. That was until Roma set up the cross on the far side of the field in the shade. The players went through their warm-ups, scrimmaged a bit on a short field, and then practiced some penalties. The session, which was advertised to last from 6 o'clock to 7:30, ended by 7:05. To make matters worse, all of the players went straight to the locker room, except for Fusato, who signed a few autographs behind the goal he was working at. My Roma flag, one of 2 in the stadium, hanging proudly from the concrete wall in front of the seats, was not enough to draw any of the players' glances, let alone attention. While most people stayed to watch Real Madrid take the field at 8 o'clock, we decided to leave and seek out the Roma bus. I knew beforehand the team bus would be in a secure area, so there was no hope of approaching players outside the stadium. However, with the practice over so early, my fiancé and I joined a handful of other fans in bidding the bus a farewell and showing the players some support. We got a wave from one player. It looked like George, but I can't be sure as he was wearing a ball cap through tinted glass. It was an anticlimactic ending to a very underwhelming experience. After last year's open session run by the team was such a great experience at Harvard, this one organized by the ICC was a major disappointment. Putting our disappointing Monday experience behind us, excitement returned for Tuesday's match with Madrid. The trip down started great with virtually no traffic getting over the George Washington Bridge at rush hour. Maybe this was redemption for the previous night's suffering. I should have known better, as the smooth drives down to Jersey and back to New York were some of the highlights of the night. The closer we got to the stadium, the more threatening the sky became. We parked the car and began eating our sandwiches and having a beverage when the bolts began appearing in the distance. I checked the weather app, which showed thunderstorms looming any minute, so we choked down our sandwiches and suds and hightailed it into the stadium for cover. The rains came along with the lightning, and everyone spilled into the causeways. As we patiently waited for the storms to pass and the stands to reopen, I took mental notes of the fans that passed by. I had estimated about a 90-10ths advantage for Madrid in terms of supporters, but as fan after fan passed by, I realized that might have been a bit optimistic from a Roma standpoint. The storms finally passed and we made our way to the Roma supporters section. The seats were great, but clearly people don't read when they buy tickets because less than half our section was wearing Giallorossi. To make matters worse, the most obnoxious Madrid fans were seated directly behind us. I'm in the ASR supporters section. Let's just say there's not much Giallorossi. Steven Chavillo, at Steven Chavillo, August 8, 2018. The game started and Real quickly scored less than 2 minutes in on a great ball from Bale to Asensio with Marcano in pursuit. Spaniard was burned badly by his compatriot and Olsen was slow off his line. I quickly realized in living color what I'd already known all along: Olsen isn't Alisson. Real continued to own the game and in the 15th minute Marcano was burned again, this time by Bale. That's when I realized that our centre-back issues behind Fazio and Manolis are far from solved. Also uninspiring is Marcano. Both of those goals happened right in front of my section. Steven Chavillo, at Steven Chavillo, August 8, 2018. If the 2-goal deficit in 15 minutes and watching Marcano weren't bad enough, the fact that drunken Madrid fans behind us spilled their full beer all over my fiancé's seat made matters worse. I could see her blood start to boil over as this group, especially the woman, was already on her nerves. She turned and asked them if they were going to dry her seat, to which they responded they didn't have napkins and didn't offer a solution. As we turned back around they began chatting about us in Spanish. Much to their shock I responded to them in Spanish saying that I understood and their tune quickly changed and became apologetic. I guess those college Spanish classes came in handy. As the drunken old man asked what he should use to clean the mess I responded with La Camisa de Real Madrid, to which the girl exclaimed, "What the FCK?" while old man gasped in utter shock. The apologies continued and the situation fizzled out. Unfortunately, with the way Roma were playing, it appeared as if putting a couple of Madrid fans in their place with my rudimentary Spanish would be the highlight of the night. As the game continued, my favorite female Real fan continued to be quite a gem, as she screamed, "F***king losers," and "We have a goalkeeper," at the Roma players every few minutes. Quite an astute observer, she might have a future as a contributor on a Real site somewhere. Roma picked up their play a bit in the second half after a massive influx of subs from both sides, but it was clear that Roma were second best on the evening. Fortunately, Strootman scored with about 10 minutes remaining to give us something to cheer about and silence the Madrid fans. I prayed for a late Roma goal to force penalties and allow me to throw a smug look at our amiga, but it wasn't to be. It was clear by the end of the game that Roma still have a lot to work on before they travel to Turin for their first match versus Torino. As we quickly made our way to the lot and got out in record time, my fiancé informed me that I was lucky that this wasn't her first Roma experience, otherwise she probably wouldn't return. Thankfully she had already invested a small part of herself after last summer's experiences. After the suffering that I put her through this week, I guess I better pick up some flowers and take her to a nice dinner this weekend.